Today we are talking about Murray Sinclair. Many will know him as the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He was a lawyer, a judge, a senator, but he was also a family man and a miishoom to Sarah Fontaine-Sinclair. She grew up with an awareness of the important roles her miishoom took on as the first Indigenous judge in Manitoba, the head of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry in the 80s, and his leadership in the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But Sarah also knew him as a guy who dressed up as Shrek on Halloween, and as someone with a very particular brand of humor. Sarah, welcome to Unreserved.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. It's an honor. And please let me just start by extending our entire team's condolences for your loss.
Thank you.
Just know that all of Indian country is there with you, sharing in your grief.
Thank you.
Now, never have I ever started an interview this way, but I understand your miishoom loved sharing knock-knock jokes.
Yes. I was looking through some of our texts the other day, and almost all of our conversations either had to do with him teasing me about music or him sending me knock-knock jokes. It was like a daily thing that he would send me.
Can you share your best, worst one?
Yes, I have some on my phone. He loved elephant ones. Those were his favorite because he loved elephants so much. And one of my favorites was, where does an elephant keep his spare tire?
Where?
In their trunk.
Ah, groaner.
I know. That basically sums up his knock-knock jokes.
Those are really good dad jokes, though. How did this routine of sending knock-knock jokes and terrible dad jokes begin with you and him?
It really happened as long as I remembered. Like a lot of what we do in our family is very playful teasing. It's how we show our love a lot. And my miishoom was just a great example of it. He loved making me laugh. He always taught me that laughter is like the best medicine. Well, one day I asked him, miishoom, where do you get all of these knock-knock jokes? And he just said, they're miishoomisms. That's what he told me in a text. But then one day when I was about 9, I found his knock-knock joke book eventually. So
the truth is revealed.
The truth was revealed.
Were you crushed or were you like, ha ha?
I was more, like, I always knew that they were too good to always be made up by him.
By good, you mean bad?
Too bad, yeah, exactly.
What are some of the, favorite memories that you hold close to you now about your miishoom?
Well, the relationship that I had with him was very based in stories. He would always be teaching me, telling me about, teaching me teachings through stories. Some of my favorite ones was he would tell me these Nana Bush stories, always on car rides or when I was at his house, and he would always be telling them in these really like animated voices, and I always remember feeling so engaged with these stories. And then suddenly I'd hear snoring, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, miishoom fell asleep because of how animated these stories were that he would tell me. So then I'd have to go and get my kukum, my grandmother, to come and wake him up. But those were some of my favorite memories with him, just learning about these teachings through these really funny stories that he'd tell me.
Oh, that would be so great to hear Murray, doing all the voices and acting it out. I'm having a problem picturing it, though. Can you describe that scene for me, please?
Of acting stuff out?
Yes.
Well, it would depend on if we were on the couch, he would start off by like sitting down, and he'd be like, okay, Sarah, I'm going to tell you a very sacred story. And then he'd go off into this, like, he'd be telling me the scenes, and he'd be describing the nature around. And then when he would get to a really funny section, he'd have this like crooked smile on his face, and then he'd start doing like these voices, like really high pitched if it was like a bird or something, and then really low pitched if it was like a porcupine or like a donkey or something that he was talking about. So he had all these different voices and very big hand gestures.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Your Mushum, Murray Sinclair, released a memoir earlier this year, Who We Are, 4 Questions for a Life and a Nation. What do you know about how that memoir began?
So what I know about it is that it started off, the idea of this memoir wasn't even, it wasn't a memoir at first. My Mushum had a stroke shortly after I was born, and he saw that, or he decided that he wanted to write these letters to me, so that if he were to pass away before he could share on all of the stories of his past and of his of what he learned through his legal work, that I could have access to them. So he'd write me these letters. I've never seen them, but I know that they're in his home somewhere, and tell me about different things that he learned. And he especially wrote me lots of letters during the TRC when he was really having a hard time listening to all of these stories, and he wanted to share kind of how he was feeling with me. So that's where the idea started, and then it blossomed into him wanting to write a book when I became older. And it really, those letters were for me, but I realized that also this book is a gift to me, but also a gift to Canada, a gift to the nation, which I find really beautiful.
It is beautiful, a beautiful gift. But how does it feel to know that memoir could have been called Letters to Sarah?
That would have been, I think he was talking about that title with me before, and it would have been really touching. But I think the 4 questions is a really good way that he framed it. He always made sure that I knew how to answer those questions from a very young age. I remember him always sharing me stories of where my family came from and who I am as an Anishinaabe woman. He'd tell me the story of my name. I have an Anishinaabe name, which is Nimiji Nibekwe, and he would tell me every one of these Anishinaabe names come with a story behind them, and he'd make sure that I knew this story really, really well. So he made sure that I had that foundation of where I came from, always within me from a very young age.
Are you able to share that story with us, or is that something you keep close and private?
No, I can share that story.
That would be great.
So Nimijien Nibekwe, it means the light that dances on the water woman. So the story starts off with, it was dreamt by one of our elders in our community, and I call him my uncle. And he woke up on this mountain in Thunder Bay. It was called Sleeping Giant in Thunder Bay. He woke up on that mountain, and he saw all of these animals crowded along the side, and he was wondering what these animals were all looking at. So he went over to the edge of this mountain, and he looked down onto the water, and he saw, my family has different interpretations of what he saw, because that's a teaching, every person can interpret the story differently. But Mushum said that he saw this little girl coming out of the water and dancing on top of it, and in the form of these glistening lights. So whenever you see those glistening lights on the lake, of the sun being reflected off of it, that's who I am. So I've always been really connected to the water as an Anishinaabe woman, and I feel really connected to the earth, and that's kind of the teaching of my name.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
And how does it help you answer those 4 questions? Where do I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? And who am I?
For me, where I come from is grounded in that name. I feel very much like I came from, one of my purposes is to take care of the water, and water is where we all come from. We all live in water for the first few months that we're growing in our mother's bellies. So that's where I come from, but I also come from a family of very strong leaders, like my Mushum and like my father and like my mother. I was always told that being a leader is important, but finding your way to be a leader is the most important, whether it's in a gentle and kind way or whether it's being outspoken and public speaking or just showing people leadership through actions. So that's where I say I come from. Where I'm going, it's hard for me to say, but that name kind of dictates that I must look towards the earth. I must continue my work towards advocating for the earth. I've done a lot of climate advocacy. I helped organize a few climate strikes, and I find that where I'm going is also in music too. I share that love of music with my miishoom. He loved AC/DC and country and rock and roll. Those are some of his favorites.
Absolutely.
He loved Pink Floyd too, and so I'm currently studying music in university, and I feel really connected to him in that way. Like we would always be exchanging songs. It used to be when I was a child we connected through stories, and then when I was older we connected through songs, which I feel really beautiful. Is really beautiful and powerful. I feel that I'm here to bring a lot of light. As my name says, the light that dances on the water. I try to bring a lot of happiness and joy wherever I go. Sometimes it's hard when I'm getting up in the morning and I'm a little grumpy. I haven't had my matcha latte.
I hear you.
Yeah, but I find that my role is to bring a lot of light to people's lives, and I try my best to do that. And then, who am I? My miishoom always says that you don't really know that question, that you don't really know the full answer to that question until you pass away. Right before you pass away, you kind of can answer that because you look at the entirety of your life and see what you've done throughout your life. But right now, what I feel that I am is a daughter. I'm a niece. I'm also a cousin. I'm a friend. I'm a climate and social justice activist. I'm a granddaughter. And I'm someone who loves the earth and loves animals and wants to dedicate my life towards advocating for that too. So that's who I'm also a musician. Almost missed that one.
Almost missed that one.
But yeah, that's who I am, I feel right now.
That's a really beautiful and clear vision of self, Sarah.
Yeah.
What about for your miishoom? Would you be able to answer those 4 questions about him?
Yeah, I was thinking about these quite a bit. Where he comes from is a little bit still hazy to me. I don't know his childhood as much as him being a miishoom, but I know that he came from Little Peguis First Nation, and he was raised by a lot of really strong women when he was younger. He was raised by these aunties that he would call the big aunties because they had these big personalities and would tell him do a lot of scolding, but in a very gentle and loving way. He grew up with a lot of racism in his childhood, which I think propelled him in his later years to do all the stuff that he did. He learned about the injustices from a very young age. He went to public school. He faced a lot of racism and discrimination, but that propelled him to be really amazing in his later life. He always tried to mention that he was named Athlete of the Year. He was very proud of that. And he was also very proud that he was his class valedictorian. And he was very proud of me when I became my class valedictorian. So I share that with him too. I'm sure I'll share that in all of my bios throughout my life.
Yeah.
Like he did.
And what year was he Athlete of the Year?
I'm actually not certain. I would have to look that up. But I am.
It was some time ago, though.
It was some time ago. It was in high school for him. So it was. He was still very proud of that, even in his last years of his life.
And what about where am I going?
Throughout his entire life, he went on a journey, a very hard one, of teaching the nation, of doing a lot of educating. Educating was one of his passions. Even though he wasn't a teacher, he believed that education was really powerful, and he passed on that teaching to me, that educating people is the only way that this country can advance. And if we're doing it in a very open and honest way, that's the best way of educating people, with a lot of kindness and respect, like mutually. But where he's going now is a very beautiful place. We have teachings in our culture that they go towards a spirit world full of beauty, where there's no pain, and no sadness. There's a lot of teachings behind that story that we only share at celebration of life, his celebration of life. But he's going towards a very beautiful place. And we believe that he'll see all of his ancestors and his beloved. He loved dogs too, and kids, but dogs especially. We had a dog named Nietzsche that he loved, that was passed on to my aunt, that she took care of after he started getting a little more immobile. And so I think that he will be very happy to see his beloved dog Nietzsche.
And why am I here?
Why am I here? He was here for many reasons, but I think it all comes back to educating. I think he did a lot of educating. He also was here for our family a lot too. He showed us, especially the younger people in our family, how to be really beautiful and powerful leaders. He always taught us that through a lot of humor with us, a lot of teasing and telling you to go do these things, either in ceremony or at family dinners. So he always instilled like these teachings of love and caring within us. But as for Canada, I feel like he was put here to give a lot of himself to our people, and to showing us a brighter future towards reconciliation, showing us a pathway, giving us direction. I feel is one of his gifts that he gave us.
Yeah, a beautiful gift. And finally, this is a big one. Who am I?
He was so many things, but the way that I knew him, first of all, was the guy who dressed up as Shrek for Halloween.
I love picturing that in my head.
Yeah, so I knew him in that way, and full of humor. But I also know that he was a powerful leader for Indigenous people in our community. He was an educator. He was a judge and a lawyer that always tried to advocate for a more equitable system. He was a son. He was an uncle to so many people within ceremony and outside of ceremony. He was a father. He was an amazing grandfather, an amazing miishoom, full of love and always full of. I just keep coming back to the laughter because that's always how I knew him. And he led with a lot of kindness. Who he was built and founded on, or the foundation of who he is love and kindness, and a lot of courage too. He had a childhood where he faced a lot of things. He overcame a lot of that and decided to use those things that he learned in his childhood to propel him to do a lot of stuff that he did in his later years of heading the TRC, of being an amazing lawyer, an amazing mentor, and just an amazing grandfather.
Yeah. Earlier you had mentioned that these 4 questions weren't just for you or your family or ceremony family, but it was also for the nation, and you called it a gift. How does it feel to share those lessons with the entire country?
I feel really honored that I'm able to do that. I think I'm really grateful for my miishoom for instilling those like being able to answer those 4 questions, because for a lot of young Indigenous peoples, they can't answer those 4 questions for so many different reasons. So I feel really grateful that he gave me that gift of being able to answer those for both him and me.
How do you hope that the country takes that gift?
I hope that they learn from a lot of the teachings that he shares in his book and within his life. I hope that people look at his life and see not just that he was a leader, because that was a big part of who he is and an important part, but also that he was full of love and that he was an amazing family member, a very big family man, as you said in the start, and that he was so much more than just like the leader of the TRC. He was very much proud of all his lawyer work and his judge work, and I hope that people look at that and see what he did in the other jobs other than the TRC, and see how that also was him showing us how we can go towards reconciliation.
Yeah, as you say, he was a lot more than all the things that people think of him as. A justice, a senator, a leader of the TRC, and other inquiries. And at your Mushoom's memorial service on November 10th here in Winnipeg, your dad, Negon Sinclair, spoke very, emotionally about his father and your Mushoom as a poet, an artist, an educator. What can you tell us about those more artistic parts of his life? Wood whittling?
I always knew him as when I was younger, he was always carving. When he was less busy, he would always be very proud of his carvings. He took me down to his studio a lot and showed me how to sand the wood. He was a very big carpenter. I remember this one carving that he had in his kitchen that he was always super proud of, but that was a little hidden away because my cookum didn't like it as much because it was. So we're Fish Clan, he's Fish Clan, Rainbow Trout Clan specifically, and my cookum is Bear Clan, or was Bear Clan. And he had this carving in his kitchen of a fish biting a bear, like a bear's butt. So again, that humor comes back. As an artist, he was always trying to make people smile.
It must have been a big fish.
It was actually it was a small fish, but very mighty. It was dangling in the air, biting the bear. It was very funny.
That does sound very much like Murray.
Yeah.
You also spoke at that service. How did you decide, what stories you were going to share with people across Turtle Island who attended the service or who were listening, streaming online?
I remember me and my dad were writing our speeches in a coffee shop next to each other, and it took me a while to decide what I wanted to write about. My dad knew right away. He always knows right away. But I took a little while. I was listening to some AC/DC, remembering him, and after a while of thinking, and I was starting to write about his work in the TRC, and how that kind of impacted me. I was thinking about how a lot of people are going to be sharing about his role as a leader of Canada, of a lot of the TRC, of being a lawyer. But I wanted people to more see how amazing of a grandfather he was and how amazing of a family member he was, because I don't think people saw that as much, because he did that a lot privately. He was very protective of all of us. So I really wanted people to see how much both love for Canada that he had, but also love for his grandchildren and love for his family and love for his children that he had.
When the Truth and Reconciliation, Commission released its final report, its calls to action, that really kind of showed up that love that he had for family, that love that he had for people, for Indigenous people. And of course, that final report really rocked the country. It changed, what we thought we knew about our history. How old were you then, and what were you seeing and experiencing at that time?
Oh, I was still young. I was still pretty young. I think I was about 8 or 9. maybe even 7, somewhere in between those ages. But I grew up going to all of those TRC events. My parents made sure that I saw them. The only parts that they didn't show to me was when the survivors were telling their stories. And so I grew up seeing my miishoom heading those TRC events, and I always felt a lot of pride and a lot of me wanting to be like that when I was older. So when the final TRC event happened, I was there. We were walking down a street in Quebec, and we were going towards, I forget what building we were going towards, but we were going towards a building. And I didn't walk the whole way, so my cousins didn't also, their other grandchildren. And we all hopped in a car for the last 15 minutes of the walk. I remember being in that car with my cousins and with my miishoom and cookum, and just seeing how both prideful he was of his work, as he was seeing all the people walking along in this parade, but also how tiring that journey was. It was very tiring for him doing that work. Yeah, I just feel like he had a lot of pride in that moment in the car, and I felt a lot of pride too. I got to, during the final event, there was this prayer that we had at the very beginning, and I got to finish off the end of that prayer. I had I said the little amen and all of that. He made sure that I was included in that event too, which I'm really grateful for. I think that shows that he was very much thinking about the next generation.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. That's not a perspective, many people would have, as especially as a young child watching somebody in their family have to lead something so difficult, and seeing the weight of that, and sharing, him with so many people, the survivors, the other commissioners, the whole country. Was that ever challenging for you and your family?
I think we definitely felt it. We didn't get as much time with him as I think we all wanted. But we all saw the importance of the work that he was doing. He was called to do that work, and that was what he wanted to do. And so I think we all of our time with him was very sacred and special. And I feel really grateful that we were able to have that time with him, but that he was also able to have that time with the nation that he was called to do, I think.
When you say he was called to the work, what does that mean, being called to work, mean to you?
I think that he always had a knack for leadership. From when he was younger, he was a very mischievous child. For what I knew about him, he was always playing pranks, especially with his brother, Uncle Buddy. So he's always a leader in that way, from when he was young. But also, his name also dictated a lot of what he wanted, or what his calling was in life, I think. His traditional name is Mizanagijik Iban, and that means the person who looks towards the sky and sees pictures in the sky. I feel that he saw in his name that, or he envisioned a country. He envisioned a lot of progress that we could have as Canada towards reconciliation, and so his name, I feel like, dictated his role as a leader to envisioning a better Canada and a better future for the next generations.
So, Sarah, in terms of reconciliation, of course, we know that was near and dear to your miishoom's heart. But even he said that that's not going to be accomplished in our lifetime. How do you feel that you carry on that work?
For me, I do a lot of activism work. I grew up in protests. My dad headed a lot of protests in Winnipeg, so I grew up seeing that leadership. Because I experienced that, and I learned about injustices from a young age from both my dad and from my miishoom. I feel very called to do a lot of educating within. I did a lot of educating within my high school, and advocating for other Indigenous students. And I do workshops with my dad too. I'll help him speak sometimes. And I feel that my role in advancing reconciliation is educating others and also breaking through maybe walls that we haven't been able to get through. As I'm studying music in university, I play the flute. And so my hope is within maybe that world that I can get to more people who maybe wouldn't look into reconciliation right away, or who wouldn't look into maybe the discrimination that's happening right now, and show them that through music in whatever way that may be, through compositions or through talking about different Indigenous artists and how they might have composed. I find that my miishoom saw this too, but I find that music is a very powerful tool of bringing people together that may not have been brought together otherwise.
Lots of public speakers in your family. Of course, we all know Nigan. And his writing and his public speaking and his organizing in community for missing and murdered Indigenous women, for all these movements. How did your miishoom support you and your family in doing that work?
He always encouraged us to speak in front of others, especially in ceremony. He encouraged us all to be leaders and to share our own family teachings within ceremony. But for me specifically, I used to do these French-speaking competitions. I used to do concours d'oratoire, and it was like a French-speaking competition that you would do, and you'd write a whole speech out that you'd have to memorize. And my miishoom knew French because he had to learn it when he was doing legal work. And so he would always listen to my French speeches, and he'd correct some of the grammar, and he'd teach me over the phone usually, because he was always traveling to different places, about like where to look. He always told me to, when I'm public speaking, to divide the crowd into like 3 sections, and to look at the crowd in that way, and to always lead with humor. He would always tell me to tell a joke at the beginning of a speech, because that's how you get people relaxed. His favorite is like, I know that I'm the one holding you back from the bathroom. That was his favorite one. But yeah, he would empower me to do a lot of public speaking. And concours d'oratoire is really where I started that public speaking journey. So he's very foundational in that for me.
Why do you think it was important for him that you and your family were so involved in community in that way?
It goes along a lot of our teachings and ceremony. Community is very important because we believe that everyone in a community has an important role to play in educating our community, and also in leadership too. But also I think that community, us being involved with the community, was really important because he saw a lot of injustices in our community, especially within Winnipeg, and I think that he wanted us he wanted to ensure that we would take on that work when we were older, and I think also that he really wanted the community, I don't know how to end this question, but that's kind of what I have to say about that one.
Really wanted to uplift and really heal the community.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly it. I think he wanted us to see the injustices that I said in our community, and then to make sure that we could carry on his work in the future in whatever way that was appropriate towards us as individuals.
And finally, Sarah, what do you think your miishoom's legacy will be, as a treasure of this nation and as your miishoom?
I think that he was a very important person in Canada. He will be known, I think, for many generations for the work that he's done. I think that his legacy will be rooted a lot in his way of giving us a path forward towards reconciliation. I think the country was really lost for a long time about, how we can move forward and what we can do to be better Canadian citizens and to be able to be better for each other, to be more empathetic towards each other. And he really gave us a path that we can follow to be able to lead ourselves toward reconciliation. So he gave us a bit of a pathway that can dictate what we can do. So I think he'll be known for that. And I hope that his legacy will be seen with a lot of love too. He led with a lot of love throughout his entire life, and I hope that people see that kindness and love that he always led with. And yeah, I hope that people also know that he was an amazing motorcycle man. He loved motorcycles. So I hope that people see that silliness and also that seriousness that he had within his life and that he balanced.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. You take care.
You too.
Sarah Fontaine-Sinclair is the granddaughter of Murray Sinclair. She is Anishinaabe and Cree and currently a music student at the University of Ottawa.